So quick intro, my name is Sheena. I'm from Canada. I started freediving in 2015. In 2016, I decided not to go back home to Canada, and I kept on freediving. I became an instructor. 2018, I entered my first competition. Didn't know what the heck I was doing, but I did quite well. I did a national record for Canada. Actually, I did a couple, I can't remember. And I got addicted to competing. So I guess what I'm known for in the freediving world is I've done a couple different national records for Canada, some Continental records for North America, and I've gone past 100 meters self-powered with the monofin, which is something that not a whole lot of women have done. So I do know some things about mouthfill, some things. It's not perfect, but I can equalize quite deep. Any questions about me? Hopefully that, pardon?
Which part of Canada?
Alberta. Nowhere near the ocean. Where are you from? Vancouver. Oh, you've got ocean. I don't have ocean. And so as people were trickling in, I was curious to know like what the split was of the class. So I know we have some wave twos, raise your hands. Yeah, wave threes. Okay, wave four. There should be more wave fours in a Moutfill EQ class, but, and people who are here instructing. A couple instructors. Okay, cool. Nice mix, nice mix. The title of the class in the guide is Mouthfill Equalization, but I actually don't fully agree with that title. I don't think that mouthfill is an equalization technique. I think it's a equalization strategy, or more specifically an air management strategy, but we're gonna get into that. So we did that. So what is a mouthfill? So a simple definition of mouthfill and a little bit about like why I wanted to do this workshop. I think that mouthfill, it's not an equalization technique. It's an air management strategy. What you do is you basically fill the mouth, so the mouth including the cheeks, with air, and you're gonna use this air to equalize as you descend without topping up or refilling the oral cavity with reverse pack. So does everyone know what a reverse pack is already? Anyone not know what a reverse pack is? Okay, cool, this is great. Why I wanted to teach this is because when I did my mouthfill class, I was told a lot of wrong things. I was given a lot of misinformation. I was with 13 other master students, and we sat down for 2.5 hours of theory, and we had the instructor, who I found out later doesn't actually know how to equalize using this particular air management strategy. He was like, okay guys, this is a really advanced technique. It's gonna be really hard to learn. Does that sound familiar, or no one has gone through that yet? And then he proceeded to be like, glottis, soft palate. You must learn to control these. You must learn to control them in this way and independently. And then he gave us all balloons. Has anyone been through the balloon stuff already? Yeah? And they make you put the air into your mouth, and then you try to put it out of your nose. And I was led to believe that if I could do that, that I could do a mouthfill. Does it sound familiar? Yeah? No? Maybe? Well, guess what? I couldn't do it. I could not get that air to go in my mouth and out my nose. I was the only one of the 13 students who couldn't do it. So I was pretty sure that I couldn't figure out this mouthfill thing. What I want to convince you, more than really teach you how to do it, is that it's actually not super mystical. It's not, first, it's not an equalization technique. It's not really as complicated as some people make it out to be. And that if you can frenzel equalize, which hopefully everybody here can, then you probably already have all or most of the tools that you need to equalize using a mouthfill strategy. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? So once again, just to be really clear, what you're gonna do is you're gonna load mouth and cheeks with air, and you're gonna use that air to equalize instead of constantly refilling. So normally when we're frenzeling, like if I'm doing free immersion and I'm frenzeling, I'm pulling and I'm equalizing, and probably every pull, or maybe every 2 pulls, or every 3, I'm refilling the oral cavity as I go. And with mouthfill equalization or mouthfill air management strategy, at some point I'm not going to refill. I'm going to shut my glottis and just keep using this air. Let's see what we got next. Yeah, I said that. Why mouthfill? So why would we do this? Perfect. Why well, I put it on the board, I guess. Julie sped ahead of me, but that's okay. So why would we want to do that instead of reverse packing? First one. Thank you, Julie. For many divers, reverse packing can become a bit difficult as you get deeper. For some people, it can become a bit dangerous. Now, just a little caveat there, it can actually be a totally legit equalization strategy. I know Adam teaches a workshop called, has anyone done, I think it's sexy frenzel or deep frenzel. And that's all about like how do you reverse pack safely and efficiently to deep, deep, deep depths, like 100 meters. So it is possible, but for most people it's pretty tricky. So has anyone been descending down the line on one of your deep or deeper dives, and as you're getting deeper, it's not that your actual equalization of the the ears is getting harder, it's that it kind of feels like you have no more air to work with, and you're kind of like, yeah, I see people are nodding. Yeah, so that's either going to be like it getting harder for you to reverse pack, or maybe some mistakes with the reverse packing, or you're approaching your residual volume. Does anyone not know what residual volume is? No, that's okay. So I like to, I guess, give a little demo of like what it would look like to hit residual volume. Residual volume, it's the portion or the percent of air in your lungs that you can't use. It's sort of like the minimum size that your lungs are used to being or used to functioning. And so if I was going to try and hit my residual volume right now, I could do something like this. I've exhaled forcefully. I've used my abdominal muscles to push all the air that I can out of my lungs as much as I can. Now, there's still air in my lungs, but I can't access that air. They've reached kind of their minimum volume that I'm able to use. And that's going to be different for everyone. Different education systems teach it as either like maybe 20 or 25% of your total lung volume on average, which means that it could be like around 1 liter for females, a little bit more for males. But what's happening when you're descending on a dive and it's kind of getting harder to refill the oral cavity, refill the mouth with air, is you're approaching or you're reaching that residual volume. And so that can happen at depths around like 30 meters, or maybe if you've got a really small RV, maybe 40. So does that sound familiar? Yeah, so one reason you might want to use a mouthfill is you're diving to depths 30, 40, deeper than that, and it's hard for you to reverse pack, or you can't do it in a relaxed way without risking injury. So you might choose to switch to using this like stockpile or suitcase of air that you filled earlier. So it could be safer, could be easier. Another reason that you might choose to use it is for many people using mouthfill, so using this supply of air instead of continuously topping up, can be more relaxing. You don't have to do the constant refill, constant motion, constant thinking like that. It can be more relaxing depending on which equalization technique you use with it. So any questions about why we might want to use mouthfill, or about the depths that we might want to start using it with? I mean, I've literally seen divers that like mouthfill at the surface and go down to 20 meters, and it's neither right nor wrong. It's just a sort of interesting application of it. No questions? Cool. So who here can already mouthfill or thinks they can already mouthfill? I know a couple people were showing me. Nice. When should you learn it, I guess, is the next question. In the multi-novice materials, I believe they introduce it in the wave 3. And you keep working on it in the wave 4. I think that it's a good idea to start learning it or start thinking about it as you start diving closer to your RV, to your residual volume. But I also think that there's some merit to doing more dives to your residual volume, whether that's 25 or 30 or 35 or 40 with frenzel, so that you also get really efficient at your reverse packing. But definitely by wave 3, or certainly by wave 4 and beyond, it's a nice idea to start learning how to do this. And next, how to mouthfill. And next. All right, guess what? It's super, in some ways, okay, in theory, it's easy. But I don't know if anyone's tried learn it, maybe the application is not quite so easy, but I think really I want to simplify it for you guys. So here it is. Number 1, at a depth, when it's still easy and relaxing to do so, you're going to fill the cheeks and mouth with air using what they call a charge. Anyone already know what a charge is? Charge your mouth fill? Does someone want to do a charge, a nice loud charge for me? No one? No one wants to? Yeah, get it. Nice. Yeah, so the charge, different agencies, they'll call it like the M charge or the N charge. It's basically just making a noise to help you move air from the lungs, so through the glottis or the vocal fold, up into the oral cavity. One more little thing, at a depth where it's still easy and relaxing to do so. Any guess like where that depth might be? Now, not a number, but like an idea. Like let's say your RV is 30. Like by 30 meters, you have a hard time equalizing. Where would you want to, approximately depth, like where would you maybe want to fill your mouth?
Maybe 10, 12-ish.
10, 15, maybe even 20, yeah. But something like that. Basically, you want to do this at a depth where it's still easy and relaxing for you to do so. You don't want to have to be straining or pushing, because that's going to result in you feeling a little bit stressed out and probably a worse mouth fill. Makes sense? Cool. Okay, so you fill your mouth, you do your charge. You're going to hold this air in your cheeks and your mouth. You're not going to let it go back down, and then you're going to begin to equalize. We're done. Let's go. Easy, right? Okay, no. Let's go again. If anyone has tried this, you probably have felt, I don't know, did anyone's mouth fill just work like right away the first few times they tried it? It happens for some people. They just get it. Yeah, I've met a few people, and to those people, I'm like, I'm so jealous of you because that wasn't the case for me. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. So do any of these sound familiar? You lose your mouth fill. Has anyone ever lost the mouth fill? It's just, you've got it, it's working, and then suddenly it's gone. Yeah, this is classic. And they come up and sometimes you burp and then you're like, oh, I swallowed my mouth fill, or I lost my mouth fill. Yeah, classic. Leaking mouth fill. So you've got the air and you're descending and you're like, I'm doing it, I'm equalizing, but maybe you kind of feel like a, or you hear this, or it's there, but it's like, it's getting really small really quick. Does anyone ever have this? Yeah, I've had this. I've had all the problems, by the way. Yeah, that's why I like talking about them, because I've lived all of these problems. And another fun one, you've got the air, you got a face full of air. You're trying to equalize, but at some point it's like you've got these cheeks bulging with air, but you can't seem to get that to go to your ears. Anyone had that one? Yeah, cool, awesome. We've had all the problems. And if you haven't had them yet because you haven't tried a mouth fill yet, well, now you know what problems you might have. All right, so let's break it down. First things first, the charge. We talked about this briefly, but I want to get a little bit more detailed to help give you guys some good advice on how to do this. So far away from your RV at a depth where it's still easy and relaxing to do so, there is a little bit of a fine art to doing a good charge. And when I asked to see a couple people's mouth fills, I saw like one of what I'm going to call like the classic, I think is a mistake. And I'm going to show you again and tell me, I'm going to really exaggerate it, what you think the mistake might be. That's one way of looking at it. Did you see this movement I did with my head?
You're gonna break your neck.
People love, and I don't know if they were taught this, I see a lot of people when they mouth fill, they have this thing like, I need to get every last molecule of air from here into here. And most people that I see, they just start doing it. They think that like, okay, if I do this, oh yeah, I can cram more air up here and in here as well. But then when you bring your head down, well, you filled a lot here and here, and now when you smash your head down, suddenly you have this crazy pressure on the glottis. Does anyone not know what the glottis is, by the way, while we're at it? The glottis is, okay, if you do a full exhale, and you open your mouth and no air comes out, that's your glottis. But you hear that, that's me opening my glottis. I know if you frenzel, you actually already know how to open and close your glottis, because it's opening for you to bring mouth up into your air to do the frenzel with, and then it's staying shut while or it should be staying shut while you're actually doing the equalization. So with the mouthfill, if you do this big head motion after you do the charge, you've filled a lot of air, but then as you bring it down, you're just ramming all of that pressure against the glottis, and that right there can lead to some of the problems that we just had up on the board. So that can lead to losing the mouthfill, or I think in my experience, it's more like the leak. It's like so much pressure on this glottis that any bit of tension or like any contraction or anything, and you're gonna get like, has anyone had or heard themselves do that with the mouthfill? Yeah. I've done it. Sometimes I still do it, admittedly. Creating tension would be another error with the charge. Sometimes it's not abnormal for the abdominals to get involved. Sometimes they have to, but sometimes I see people charge and it's like, okay, here we go. Every last bit of air. You're not going to have a good time if you just tense up your whole body and then try to continue. You need to be pretty loose and soft to EQ successfully with that. Those would be, I think, the bigger errors that I see with people doing a charge. I want to show you what my charge looks like, just so you can have an idea. And this is one that works pretty well for me. It's going to sound a little bit like I don't know, like maybe a dying whale or something like that. And then if anyone has a really unique or a different charge, I'd love to see it as well. So mine, by the way, just so you know, I do my mouthfill pretty consistently. I do the charge at 20 meters. I don't do it deeper. And the reason for that, a lot of people try to do it at 30, like people who are going 70, 80, 90, 100 meters. The reason for that is I can't do it relaxed at 30. I can do it, but it looks like the unrelaxed one I just showed you. I'm like, no. I find if I just keep it at 20 and I do it slowly, like doing the whole charge takes me probably to at least 2 whole seconds. I do it slowly. I try not to move my head up, down, side, side. I try really not to move my body. I actually stop whatever I'm doing. If I'm doing free immersion or if I'm doing bifins, I actually just stop for that moment so I can focus on having a really big and good and relaxed charge. Then it always works out better. So mine, well, here you go. That's it. Dying whale. One nice consistent tone. I've heard different people do different tones. I don't know if there's a right or a wrong tone, but I have noticed for myself, if I get like too caught up in the noise, sometimes I get a leak. Like if I'm like, okay, I gotta make the biggest, loudest noise, I get a leak. And so I'm not sure exactly if it's from tension or I've done something wrong when I finish the charge, but I think a nice constant M or N charge, no need to move the head up and down, no need to, try to plane out to get more air. If you do it at a depth where it is still easy for you to do so, I think you will get all the air that you need. Makes sense? Questions? You still with me? Everyone had a long day, so I'm really impressed that people's eyes are still open and there's some smiles and everything. All right, what do we have next? Yeah, the glottis. We started talking about this. So now you're going to hold that air in your cheeks and your mouth and maybe a bit of it in your throat, and that is made possible by your glottis. And when I was talking about it a moment ago, I saw a couple people trying to explore a bit what their glottis was. So we can try the exercise that I just showed you. We can exhale and then open the mouth, but don't let any air come in or go out, and then choose when you want it to go in. So it will look like this. I made that choice to let the air in. Doesn't sound nice, sounds kind of like a dying animal. Oh wow, beautiful. Another way you can kind of feel where that, yeah, is perfect. It's the cough. If you cough, like, Yeah, it's kind of opening and closing there. As I said, if you can frenzel equalize, then actually you probably have your glottis. It can already do what it needs to do for you. Like you basically have the building blocks to be able to hold this package or parcel of air in your mouth. But there's a problem, and it's a little bit of a mental problem. When you're frenzel equalizing, like let's say we do our wave 1 or wave 2 and we're going to 20 meters or 25 meters. We're doing free immersion, we're pulling, we're equalizing, we're reverse packing, we're refilling our mouth. Well, all we know up until we start learning to do a mouth fill is that we have to refill this oral cavity by reverse packing. And that's actually all that we've been doing. Or if we haven't, then we're probably getting stuck around 15 meters. I don't know if that's been anyone's experience. But so all you've been doing in your whole freediving journey until wave 3 or until wave 4 is reverse packing and frenzel, reverse pack, frenzel, reverse pack, frenzel. So your brain and your glottis have been trained a little bit that this is the pattern. This is the sequence that we got to open and add air. And your brain, like whether you realize it or not, it at least mine, it kind of always was like looking at how much air was in the mouth. And if it wasn't an amount that made my mind happy, then I was reverse packing without even thinking about it. Like it was just happening. On wave 1, like it just happens. Like people aren't aware of it. If they can equalize successfully from 0 to 20 meters, I guarantee you're just reverse packing and not thinking about it, which is perfect. But this causes us problems when we start learning mouth fill because this is how our brain and our glottis have been trained. So now our job is going to be hold this air, but this and this have been trained that we need to keep topping it up as it shrinks. So I've got some fun exercise we can try in a second. So what we're going to have to do is become really conscious of what it feels like when we're doing a reverse pack. And we're going to have to do a little bit of training and practice. Probably it's going to be dry. I'm a real fan of dry training. To get our mind and our body comfortable with the fact that the air in our mouth is going to shrink. We want it to shrink, and we don't want to refill it. We want to use it till we can't use it anymore, basically. So here's a little exercise. We're going to see if anyone can nail this one. Usually it's a mix. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do a normal inhale, normal exhale. So this would be FRC, functional residual capacity, or neutral. And I'm going to frenzel equalize. And every time I equalize, I'm going to let a little tiny bit of air leak out of my nose. I'm not going to worry about what's happening with my ears. Because I'm not actually thinking at this point about equalization. I'm thinking about air management. And what I want to achieve is I want my mouth to end up empty. When it ends up empty, I'm going to point to it, and then I'm going to reverse pack. And I'm going to refill it. When I refill it, I'll put my finger up like this so you can see. So. It's kind of hard to see from far away, but I'm going to get you to try it on yourselves in a moment. So the goal of the exercise, it sounds really simple, but it might actually be really tricky. We're going to find out in a moment, is to pinch your nose but loosely, and when you frenzel, don't worry about the ears, just let a tiny puff of air leak out every time. And first, see if you can end up empty. That's the first trick. Try it for a moment. And then I'm going to ask you a question about it. Nice. Oh, this is looking good. Okay, keep going. Is anyone not finding empty? Aha! Anyone else can't go empty? No, maybe, maybe not. Yeah, a few people are like, it never goes to empty. Any ideas why it never goes to empty? You think you've Valsalva?
Like to just push the air back up.
Ah, You mean reverse pack.
Is it?
Yeah. So if you're not finding empty, first of all, if you found empty, raise your hand. Cool. Nice. That's great. If you didn't find empty, it means that without realizing it, you are refilling it. And the reason you're doing that, it's a very good reason, is because that's how we equalize up until wave 3 or 4. Is we reverse pack, we equalize, we reverse pack, we equalize. Or maybe we reverse pack and we equalize twice and then we do it again. It's going to be different for everyone and different depending on the depths that you're doing. Okay, so if you can find empty, then your next task is going to be go to empty and then find a way to keep going. So reverse pack and keep going. If you can't find empty, then really your whole task is just to repeat this in a mirror and try to find out what it is you need to do to, it's basically your brain to allow your mouth to get empty. Takes a little bit of practice. I've played around with this with a lot of students and a lot of different instructors, and they can all find it, but for some people it's like, okay, go home and try to find empty in the privacy of your room. That's how I work with all of these exercises. So what you want to do here is train your brain and your body that actually it's okay to run out of air. It's kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do with wave 1 and wave 2. We're like, no, you need to keep reverse packing. You're not refilling. That's why you're not going by past 15. But now we want to become conscious of it. So first, train yourself to be able to get to empty. Then become really, really aware of what it feels like when you refill. Watch yourself do it in the mirror because you'll see this part here drop the back of your tongue. Makes sense? Anyone lost or confused? You guys still with me?
How many times can you usually frenzel until you run out?
It depends on the person. It depends. And also depends how deep you are. If you're in the first 10 meters of your dive, you're going to need to refill more, right? Yeah, but then for dry, again, depends. It depends person to person. Let's see, for me, it's maybe 10 at most. But also depends which sort of frenzel lock you're using, your tongue position, because some of them will use more air than others. So short answer is it depends.
Probably not over 15.
Probably not. If you're still going strong and there's no sign of coming close to empty, then you probably are refilling. So your task will be see if you can go to empty, and then when you do, see if you can consciously refill and become really aware. She's exhausted. She's like, oh my God. And then become really aware of what that feels like. The idea here is you want to be able to allow the air to run out, but you also want to train yourself to be really sure you know what it is and what it feels like when you're reverse packing. And the reason for that is if you're doing a mouthfill and you keep losing or swallowing your mouthfill, one of the reasons, there are other reasons, but one big reason is that probably at some point as that air in your mouth is shrinking, your brain looks at that and goes, we gotta top that up. So the glottis opens without you're not actively deciding for this to happen. It's like a habit, like a twitch, your glottis, just try to reverse pack into it, the result, boom, it goes back down. Make sense? Cool. So this is a fun little dry thing you can do to get really familiar with what it feels like to reverse pack and also what it feels like to allow yourself to end up empty. All right, what else do we have? I didn't want to talk about these too much because they are done in every other mouthfill workshop that I've ever attended. Has anyone already attended a mouthfill class or workshop? Yay, some people not. It's okay. If you haven't done these already, you will. But most workshops, like the one that I took when I was learning mouthfill, they gave me a balloon and they were like, you need to be able to let the air in your mouth and out your nose, in your nose and out your mouth. I do think these are really valuable exercises to practice sort of dry glottis and soft palate control and coordination together. The reason that I don't want to go into them is because they are generally done at every other every other workshop, and because I believe that if you can frenzel, you actually have the tools you need to get started with this. So, yeah. Oh, I can, for sure. It's a PDF. I used to work in communications, so I'm ready for that. Did we? Oh, are we going forward still?
No, so this one is...
Let's go forward. Let's go forward. Okay. No, wait. Here. No, I want to talk about this one. Yeah, this is important. This is perfect. Okay. So continuing on with our mouthfill made easy. So step 1 is we've charged. Step 2 is we're holding the air in the cheeks and the mouth. We talked already about one common problem, which can be swallowing it, and that can be caused. One cause would be that you're reverse packing, or your brain and body are trying to reverse pack into the mouthfill because that's all that you know and all that you have known until now. But another reason you could swallow it is that you remember from wave 1, Boyle's law. Does anyone remember Boyle's law? The balloon, you know the balloon diagram where they have the balloon, and then the balloon gets smaller. By 10 meters, you have two atmospheres or 2 bar of pressure. Oh, wow, someone made a boss move. I wish I'd thought of that. I didn't know I could do this. Someone's a genius. Oh, wow. You've inspired me. Anyway, back to Boyle's law, which is not as exciting as what just happened there. By 10 meters, you've got 2 atmospheres of pressure, 2 bar of pressure, right? So what that means is the volume of the air in whatever the container is, whether it's a balloon or your mouth or your lungs, it's going to want to be compressed by half. And so as you continue on down the dive, gases are affected by pressure. Pressure still is affecting the air in your mouth. So the air supply is shrinking. Sometimes people think like, oh, it's shrinking because I'm using it, like I'm putting it into my ears. Well, yeah, but really it's Boyle responsible for the fact that this air is getting smaller. Now, what about the container? The container is your mouth. What if we had a balloon and it had an air supply in it, and the air is shrinking, but the actual size of the balloon is not shrinking? What's going to happen? Like, imagine you took a balloon. This is really hard to describe. I wish I could make a video of this or something. But the air in the balloon is shrinking, but the actual balloon container isn't. Yeah, exactly. So you've got. Pardon? A vacuum. Yeah. So imagine you pulled that balloon. Well, if the pressure difference between what's inside the balloon and what's outside of it is different, the air is going to be, it's going to create a negative pressure or a vacuum, and the air is going to be sucked back toward the area of lower pressure. Guess what area that is? Because the lungs still do have some air in them. It's also compressing. What's happening here is if you don't shrink the air in your mouth, and actually you have to do it, you can't just like hope that everything is going to work itself out, although I have seen some people are quite good at doing it without lesson. If you don't shrink the container, which is your mouth and cheeks, around the air, it is going to be sucked back down into the lungs. You've got a vacuum going on. So that's the other possibility for a mouthfill swallow. Does that make sense? Yeah? Cool. There are different ways of doing this. And I hesitate to like go into really a specific way, but I'm going to give you a general overview. When the air is in your cheeks, you have to maintain, regardless of which equalization technique you're using. You could be using constant pressure. You could be using hands-free or BTV. You could be using intermittent or pulsing or frenzel style equalization with your mouthfill. That's the actual equalization technique, by the way. The mouthfill is the air management, just a reminder. Regardless of which technique you're using, you have to maintain a certain gentle pressure or tension in your cheeks if the air is in the cheeks. If you don't, if you relax your face too much, down it goes. Now, many people don't realize this, but most of the mouthfill actually happens more inside the mouth than it does the cheeks. Has anyone's mouthfill reached the point where it's like there's not very much air left in the cheeks and it feels really unstable? Yeah, okay, cool. Once you reach that point, you actually have to manage that bubble of air in your mouth. And once it's sort of in your mouth, you've got some other tools available. You've got the tongue and kind of it is the tongue, but I think of it more like the floor of my mouth. And you've got the jaw a little bit. So if the air's in the cheeks, you're going to shrink that container by sort of shrinking your cheeks with it. And if the air is now small enough that you can't manage it with your cheeks and you're managing it in your mouth, you're going to use the tongue, the jaw to keep the container shrinking. And if you don't, you're going to know that you didn't manage it effectively because you will swallow it. Makes sense? Cool. Any questions so far? People's eyes are still open. I love it. Yes?
Do you ever, does it get to a point, you know, I don't know, 300 million thousand meters,
Oh, I wish.
where you go, I need to refill my mouth fill?
The thing is, I can't. Like, if it gets to that point where it's super, super small and I would like to add more air to it, and I've actually tried this because I'm a person who tends to be able to get away with a lot in terms of, I don't have injuries from diving. I don't have barotraumas or squeezes. I don't know exactly why, but I have some guesses. So I have gone pretty deep and tried to reverse pack or to refill into my mouthfill. And the deepest that I've managed to do so is going to be probably about 35 to maximum 40 meters. After that, I just can't. And in my case, the reason is as soon as my glottis opens for me to try do it, the air just gets sucked back down into the lungs. So some people can. I would say it's probably not super common, but I have heard of divers that actually can reverse pack to depths like 60 or 70 meters. And then after 70, that's when they stop refilling their mouthfill. But most of us can't.
Then if that's the case, is there a point where you just stop equalizing?
I have done dives where I have not made equalizations the whole way, but those would be dives where they were like probably the shallowest of those would be in like the 80-meter range. Because if you think about overall pressure changes on a dive, the overall pressure change between like 0 and 10 meters is quite high. But the overall pressure change between 80 and 90 meters, like realistically, that's maybe like 1 or 2 equalizations. So, and I don't encourage anyone doing this, and certainly my preference is to always be fully equalizing and to end up at the bottom of my dive feeling like I could make at least 1 more equalization. But I am guilty of having done dives where, like, let's say I'll get to 80 and like my target is somewhere in the 80s, and I like my ears are still equalized, but I can't make another one. Well, at that point, admittedly, because it's not a big pressure change, I can drift from, let's say, like 80 to 85 and still not feel any pressure in my ears. But not normally. I don't like doing that. I had one really negative experience in competition. I was doing free immersion, and I announced 78 meters. It was 2018. And I was having a bad comp, and I was like, you know what? I've never ridden my ears. Does anyone know what it means to ride your ears? Has anyone, and I'm going to include myself here, has anyone ever ridden your ears to make a goal? Yeah, like most people. Okay. So I'm human. And I was like, I don't know, at some point I lost my mouthfill due to one of the mistakes that I've been talking about. I swallowed it. And in this case, it was because I didn't shrink the container around the air supply. I know that now. I didn't know where I was, but I was like, you know what? I can't be far. Let's take these ears for a ride because I really want to do this dive. I did it. I admit. Well, it hurt. This is the first time I ever felt pain in the eardrums, and because I'm very risk averse. And I was like, I made it. I didn't rupture anything, but I'll tell you what. After I turned and I got the tag and I started pulling on the way up, all I could think for 78 meters of ascent was, you are so stupid. What if you ruptured an eardrum and now you can't dive in the rest of the competition? What have you done? And that's like and it's a slow ascent. Like that's like a minute and 30 or minute 40 just like on the way up of me thinking like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. And I got to the surface and I'm like, you know, I remove my nose clip, I'm okay. And everyone's like clapping and cheering because I did the national record, but nobody knows that I just took my ears for a massive ride. And I'm just on the line, like feeling damaged, like, oh my God, I hope they're okay. And then, you know, I go to the side and I was like, what's gonna happen when I try an equalization? I was like, and they kind of went, does anyone heard this? And I was like, oh boy. Well, thank God the next day was the rest day and I took a bunch of ibuprofen and they ended up being okay, but it was so like mentally damaging to do this long ascent thinking like, what have I done, that I've actually never done it since. If anything goes wrong, I just turn. I like to make dives fully equalized and to feel like I could do one more EQ at the bottom. And if I can't, then it tells me that I probably need to spend more time working around that depth range or realistically just below it. And I would totally encourage people to work the same way, because if you're working on dives that are near your limit and you're reaching your goal, but it's not like in a smooth and happy and easy way, I think personally, like, it doesn't make sense to increase the depth then. Like, you know, like, there's less room for error the deeper that you go. And at some point, these small things, like even these small mental things, these little stresses of like, ooh, that wasn't that great, like it can leave you with a pretty bad feeling on the ascent. And I don't know, probably everyone's had a dive where they've had like a bad feeling on the ascent. We don't want all of our dives to be like that. So, shoot, I think I went on a huge tangent. Did I answer your original question? Okay, cool.
And the tangent.
The tangents are why they have me here, I think. I think the tangents are why they have guests, is so you can like hear about our personal experience. Yes?
Do you know when did you lose your mouthfeel for that ride?
Depth range? You know where I would say it is for most people, and it was for me for a long time. I can't give you a specific meter number, but it's in the place where the air was in your cheeks, but it's getting really small. And for the longest time, I didn't realize that actually most of the mouthfill happens inside of the mouth and not in the cheeks. Like I thought, because nobody taught me mouthfill very well, or really at all, I thought that the cheeks were supposed to stay inflated until the very bottom of the dive. Did anyone else think this or currently think this? I thought that mouthfill is supposed to be like the whole way. No, at some point, and it works a little bit differently. I know people do it different ways, but what I do is when I feel the cheeks getting sketchy, that's a good word to describe it. Like they're going to get unstable. Before things get to the place where it feels sketchy, like I'm going to have trouble maintaining gentle tension, I actually stop equalizing for a second and I consciously choose to move that air into the center of my mouth. And it's kind of like there's a golf ball size parcel of air sitting on top of my tongue. And now I'm using the tongue and the jaw to create tension and to shrink that container. And the place where I would always swallow or lose my mouthfill or screw up was the place where actually shortly after I should have been making that transition, but I didn't realize that I could make that transition. So I was trying to keep the air in my cheeks, but I couldn't maintain the gentle tension to shrink that container. Does that make sense? For me, that was it was anywhere from about 55 to 65, depending on the day. And I meet a lot of divers who are diving in the, let's say, the 50 to 60 meter range, maybe slightly lower for some people. And they're having kind of the same issue. Like they're reaching that point and then they're losing or swallowing the mouthfill, anywhere from let's say 45 to 65, depending on the person. And it could be because they don't realize actually most of the magic is you managing a tiny bubble of air that's sitting on top of your tongue, not the cheeks.
And so do you still use a PTKH lock? Just use your mouthfill to refill that oral cavity, and then use those locks. And then once you get to an H lock, you just kind of put it where the H lock goes.
Sort of. I'll tell you exactly what I do, but it was a bit of an evolution to get there. Because once again, the reason I'm doing this is because nobody taught me mouthfill properly and I had to figure it all out the hard way in a way that worked for me. What I do is I do my charge at 20 meters. I fill the throat and I fill the cheeks. I start pulsing kind of frenzel style as I need it. And you have two options for pulsing. You can create pressure using the cheeks, or you can use the larynx, kind of like you would in frenzel. If you use both, it seems to put too much pressure on here, and that's where you kind of start swallowing a little every time. So the idea is to be kind of as gentle as you can, but still get a good equalization. So fill it 20 meters. From 20 to about 45 or 50, I'm pulsing, frenzel style. Somewhere, it's usually around 50. It's usually not deeper. Oh, and by the way, when I'm doing that, my tongue is pretty much relaxed on the bottom of my mouth. The tongue is really not involved. It's
How are you pulsing with the cheeks?
just pushing with the cheeks. Just little squeeze as I need to. About 50 meters is when I need to then bring any air that's left in my cheeks kind of into, let's say, into the center of my mouth. So bringing the cheeks in so that now it's like a golf ball size of air sitting on top of my tongue. When I do that, my tongue is in the T position. And if anyone doesn't know what T position is, that's the position if you were gonna do like t, 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 t. So the tongue is on the back side of the two front teeth. And actually, after that point, I no longer consciously think about T, K, which would be k, 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 and H. I stay in T for quite a long time, to be honest. That's where most of it happens. And as the air shrinks, I'm still pulsing at this point, by the way. I used to do a constant pressure, but it's too hard on my glottis. I've got contractions on the way down, which is a whole nother workshop, another story. And if I do a constant pressure, I lose air like crazy. So I'm pulsing, pulsing, pulsing. I'm kind of raising the jaw, which for me, the jaw opens a little when I bring the air into my mouth, and I'm kind of raising it and raising the tongue, kind of raising the tongue and also moving the air back so it can be used.
Kind of an analog shift between them, if you will.
Yeah, but when I say this, important to understand that I'm not making a lot of movement. Like I can show you, I'm going to show you what it looks like. I'm going to show you the one dry exercise I do to practice everything. You don't see much. The most that you see is when I make the transition from cheeks to the inside of my mouth. That's like probably the biggest visual excitement of the whole ordeal. But the rest, everything is small. I think a lot of excess or extra movement, like, it can also end up in losing pressure, like that container, the vacuum, the negative pressure, and the swallow. And I will explain how I practice that as well. Good question. Before I'm done. So I'm doing that until at some point it feels unstable. Then guess what I do? I switch to BTV or hands-free. When it feels like I hardly have any air left or things are like really unstable and I'm gonna lose it, this is where if you can do hands-free, oh my God, you can add meters, like to the place where normally you would be finished. Basically what I do then is I just relax and I have even a little bit of air left. I start opening, opening the tubes, and whatever air is there, I can actually still use to create more equalizations. That probably, once I discovered how to do that, it probably added 10 meters right there. So there's a little cheat. Yeah.
You do the hands at the very end?
The very end. Now, you can do it throughout or just for a part in the beginning. This is where I like to be really clear that a mouthfill is an air management strategy. And the actual equalization technique that you use with this air management strategy, it could be constant pressure. It could be like a frenzel style pulse, or it could be a BTV or a hands-free. It could be that you're just opening, or some people, some rare, I don't know if anyone here can do it, can just hold their tubes open. Is anyone, oh, okay, that's why you asked. Yeah, I will warn you, for you, the trick is gonna be as you hold your tubes open, which you can do, you still need to shrink your container, so your mouth, around the air. And from what I've seen, people that naturally hands-free, sometimes they have a problem with this. They're not used to creating gentle pressure or tension in the mouth, in the jaw, in the cheeks, because they never had to before. Because I'm not natural hands-free, by the way. I had to learn. But I love it now. Like when I have to frenzel, I'm like, oh, God damn, like I have to create pressure and, you know, tension. So I think this is the challenge if you're a natural hands-freer, is you still have to, you know, hold some tension in the mouth to shrink that container. Makes sense?
Do you shrink the container continuously or like step by step?
A little bit of both. In the beginning, it was pretty clunky and it resulted in a lot of swallowing, but now it happens more smoothly. And it's just practice. If you equalize intermittently, you have a little bit more leeway to do it step by step. In my experience, you can actually stop as long as you shrink the container, you can actually stop equalizing and like kind of think your way through it. It's a good question.
So, what was your sequence? Like, you use cheeks first, and then
my sequence was mouthfill at 20, cheeks and throat pulsing at about 50 meters or so is where I actually bring the air into my mouth. Then there's no more air left in my cheeks. I'm managing this golf ball of air on top of my tongue. My tongue starts off in the T, in the t position, and I'm just pulsing gently and gently moving the air kind of up and back with my jaw and my tongue. And then at the very end, when it becomes unstable, that's when I cheat and I hands-free. And I'm not ashamed to admit it.
I heard that even if you can shrink, if you don't pinch your nose, you lose it. But I'm
okay, so I'm talking about with a nose clip, I must admit, like for my dives. When you hands-free, I do know some deep divers who can do a deep and hands-free equalization with a mask. But in this situation, the mask actually becomes an extension of the rest of your, let's say your oral cavity, your sinus, your mouth, your nose. The mask it becomes basically part of that. So you've got a little bit more space to manage. I don't do this. The deepest I've tried to do it is, I think I made it to 55 or 60, but I'm not good enough. I'm not fluent enough at managing this. A good person to ask, if you go on Instagram, his name is Freediving Barbados. His name is Alex Davis, and he equalizes with a mask and a mouthfill and hands-free until like the upper 90-meter range, I believe. Yeah.
When you do your pulses,
yeah.
Do you actually like maintain like a minimal pressure and then add?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is what I've been trying to say is I'm still maintaining pressure and tension in my mouth. And when I'm doing the pulse, it's just ramping up that pressure enough to create an equalization. That's a super good way of putting it. Nice. Okay, this guy, you're the next instructor. I love it. Cool. Wow, I feel like we went on a lot of great tangents. Anyway, where we were was that you got to shrink the container around the air or you're going to swallow the mouthfill. That was how this all started. Make sense?
I noticed you move your jaw to the front. Is that something you do consciously? Because some people, they say some schools are Andreas Gary.
But I haven't done a mouthfill yet, so how do you know that I do that?
I saw it here.
Oh, you mean when I charge?
Yeah.
I move the jaw down when I charge. So if you just charge, I have different terminology for these things, but I'm going to show you two different things because it's a good question. If you charge like this, now look at this one. Did you see the difference? Could anyone not see it from where you were? Okay, so this is the first one. Actually, I'll just do it without pinching so you can see. Here's the second one. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah, so if you allow your jaw to go down, you can actually get a little bit of air in here, but you got to be careful because I believe you can actually overcharge and then you've just got too much pressure on the glottis. That's where the thing comes in. I call it cheek fill when you just do this. It's like just cheeks, like you've clenched your jaw. If you open your jaw, then you can actually then use the jaw to help you maintain some of that pressure. Problems with this, though, is I know Adam talks about gag reflex. It can actually trigger gag reflex in some people to have air sitting down there, and can cause leaks in the glottis as well. If you've got contractions on the way down, which I do, I'm not ashamed to admit it, it's not ideal, but that's my life, you got to be really careful because they can leak like that. Good question. Where am I? Let's go on. I don't even know if we'll get through all my slides, but I'm having fun, so this is great. Oh, yeah, we talked about this.
What is PTV?
Let's go back. Let's go back to the one that says constant pressure, sequential, intermittent. I think maybe one back? Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I was talking about how Mouthfill is the air management strategy, and the equalization technique, it's going to be either constant pressure, sequential, intermittent, or frenzel style, and BTV or hands-free. Someone just asked, what is BTV? BTV is French, and I believe it's like Biance tube volontaire, VTO, voluntary tube opening. There's a whole workshop. Adam and I are going to do that. It's basically equalizing without pinching your nose by doing a very specific movement of the larynx and the soft palate, which is not, it's not unlike what you do in frenzel, but it's a bit more subtle. And also by gaining some control over some of the muscles that are around the jaw and the eustachian tube, so that you can pull your eustachian tube open. Normally they're closed. And when you yawn, do you guys hear I'm going to try and make everyone yawn now. That shouldn't be too hard. Did anyone hear a click? The click is your tube actually opening. So the idea behind BTV or VTO or hands-free, they all mean the same thing. They mean equalizing without pinching your nose, is that you're able to make that click or to hold the tubes open like on command underwater. So good question. So once again, air management strategy is the Mouthfill. The EQ technique is one of these. Constant pressure means, think of it as a long frenzel. Can anyone do a frenzel where you keep your nostrils flared? It's going to be like you see how I just held them inflated for a few moments? If you can do that, that's basically a constant pressure, and that's one equalization technique that some people use with Mouthfill, is they just hold everything open with pressure from the larynx and or the cheeks. Pros of this one, it feels like you're doing nothing. I have done in the past and can do this one. It feels like you're doing nothing. It's kind of beautiful. You're just descending and everything is equalizing. Cons, it can create tension. Another con, if your eustachian tubes or your ears are not in a really good condition, it can require a lot of force to keep the tubes open. I used to equalize with constant pressure. I can't do it anymore because I have one really super dysfunctional eustachian tube. Does anyone else know that they have a dysfunctional? Yeah, join the club. Good news, you'll still be able to equalize deep. I can tell you all kinds of fun things about this. I have pictures of how messed up my tube is. But constant pressure is probably not going to work for you, and that's okay. Because another con of constant pressure is that's a lot of pressure on your glottis for a long time. So I think constant pressure can make it more likely for you to leak or to swallow the mouthfill. Intermittent or sequential, that's like a frenzel style, pulsing. Pros, you don't have to equalize all the time. You get to relax in between equalizations. Your glottis doesn't get so much pressure or tension on it. Cons, that reverse pack thing that we were talking about before. It's really easy to accidentally slip up and try to unconsciously reverse pack. That's where sort of training yourself to be able to comfortably end up on empty and to be really conscious about when you are refilling can be useful for when you're practicing dry. And then we got the BTV hands-free. That's super useful for the end of your mouthfill. You're absolutely not required to know it to do a successful mouthfill, though. Okay, next one. Oh yeah, I think I just said all this. Perfect. Super important. Whether you're wave 1, which I basically told the wave 1s, I'm like, I love you guys, we had fun today, but please don't come to my Mouthfill workshop because it's going to be too much. Whether you're wave 1, 2, 3, 4, instructor or beyond, and regardless of which air management or equalization technique you are using, you have to be proactive. If you get behind, if you feel any pressure building, you're going to get shut down. You have to equalize before you feel like you need to. Make sense? Anyone ever had the dive where you're like, you kind of feel it like creeping up and then, yeah, it never works out. And it happens with mouthfill as well. The biggest place I think it happens is when you get greedy because you want to keep the air in your cheeks as long as possible. You're like, oh, but I want it to last because it means I'm doing well, and you don't bring it in to that little golf ball of air sitting on top of your mouth. If you try to leave it in your cheeks, oh, this probably looks really good on the GoPro. Then you will get behind and swallow. Makes sense? I thought this slide was super important. So, oh, here we go. We've reached the point. Yes.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned free fall. The third one was soft pedal.
Oh yeah. Usually that will be if you've got air in your cheeks, but you can't equalize. Usually that will be that you're not shrinking the container. So you're not being proactive about maintaining pressure in the mouth, and you've created a little, like basically your mouth is unequalized. I know it sounds silly. It's not your ears. It's your mouth. So this soft palate kind of gets locked by the vacuum. If you're strong enough not to swallow it. So the solution there is going to be you've got to shrink the container. You got to not get behind on your equalization and your shrinking of the air in your mouth. Yeah, good question. I meant to talk about that, but I got too excited by everything else. We've reached the point where I'm going to show you the one and single exercise that I did, which finally helped me actually understand what I was doing and go deep with the mouthfill. Is anyone already diving with a nose clip or using a nose clip, be it for dry? Yeah. Is anyone not? If you're not, raise your hand. It's okay if you're not. You can do this with your fingers. It's just a little bit easier with the nose clip because what I'm going to ask you to do, and it's going to be homework, is to equalize in a mirror. So if you're using your hand here, it's just going to block some of your view. So with the nose clip, you're going to put it on, but you're not going to put it on properly. Oh wow, I'm going to sound great now. You're going to put it on so that every time you equalize, do you hear this? Air is leaking out. Reminder, when I do this, I don't care what happens in my ears. At this point, if you're wave 2 or 3 or 4, you know how to equalize. Oh wow, this sounds great. But I have it in a really good place right now, so I don't want to redo it. Don't worry about what happens in your ears. This is training the air management piece. Make sense? Cool. So you establish a leaky nose clip. You want to do this in front of the mirror, because when I started doing it in front of the mirror, I noticed, holy crap, I'm doing all kinds of weird shit that I don't think is helping me. I've got all kinds of unnecessary movement going on in my face and even in my body. Like, we do weird things that we don't realize until we film or we see it. You want to go maybe on FRC or neutral. Once you get comfortable, you can do it with less air. That's just to make it a little bit harder for you to accidentally reverse pack. But hopefully if you've done the first exercise we talked about, the one where you ended up empty, you gain some understanding of when you're reverse packing or not, which will be really useful for you now. So it's a mirror on FRC on neutral. I'm gonna do a mouthfill, and when I do it, I'm gonna watch and look at myself. That's the whole exercise. This is the best way I found to simulate a mouthfill outside of the water. So here's what it looks like when I do it, just to give you an idea. So. I tried to speed it up because I was like, man, if I do it as long as possible, I'm going to have contractions and it's going to be even more awkward. But I just went from full to completely empty without topping it up. Could you guys see okay from where you were? Yeah, so I started with the charge. I started, you could probably see my cheeks going. I was pushing, push, 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 push. And then the big piece, the super exciting part, when I did this, that was like the highlight of the whole event. That was like probably the most obvious thing other than my dance move, which by the way, it's not actually part of my free fall. In case that wasn't clear, that was just because this is kind of awkward and I've had a Coca-Cola at like 2:30, which I don't normally do. Had a lot of caffeine today. Yeah, so the whole time air is leaking out. So that means that the air in my mouth is shrinking. And I'm forced to try and manage that without adding anything else to it. That's the whole exercise. That is basically how I perfected my mouth fill. In a mirror, watching myself to see if I was doing anything weird. You could do it with your shirt up as well to see if you're doing anything weird with your abdominal muscles. That might give you some clues about reverse packs as well, especially if you're doing it on an exhale, dry. And this is all dry. And I want to give you my dry EQ sales pitch, by the way. Let's say you are doing a 2-hour dive session like what we did today. If you do, like how many good dives would you do per session, you say? Just, what's a guess? 10 good dives. Okay, if you do 10 good dives, and they are 2 minutes long each, that's a long dive. That's 20 minutes of diving, but you're only equalizing on the way down. So that's 10 minutes of equalizing. So in 2-hour dive session, you're probably doing 10 minutes of equalizing. If you're mouth filling, you're not doing a mouth fill for that whole time that you're equalizing. You would probably pull to around 10 or 15 or kick down to 20, then do a mouth fill and continue. So you're probably only practicing mouth fill in a dive session, maybe like, this is an optimistic estimate, like maybe like 7 minutes in 2 hours. Is there any other like refined and complex skill set you like you're a musician, like how long would you practice cello for in a typical session? Yeah, not 7 minutes. If you only practice cello for 7 minutes a day, like it would take you a long time to figure things out. So I want to give you the sales pitch of you got to practice this stuff dry. Because if you practice mouth fill with a nose clip or your fingers leaking, looking at yourself in a mirror and being really curious and really thinking about like, what am I doing? What's happening? Why did my jaw move that way? Am I reverse packing? If you do that even for 10 minutes per day, morning or night, it's like you've gotten more than a whole nother dive session worth of mouth fill practice. Does that make sense? Yeah, so this is the way. This is the way. More curious and like constructive practice is going to equal more discovery and learning and improvement. When I started doing this with the nose clip dry in the mirror every morning for 10 minutes, and then to make it harder, when I thought I had something that was working, I would do it while I was walking down to the waterfront to dive. So I would start to see, can I do it when my CO2 is high? So I would start doing this when I was walking. That's when I started seeing massive improvement in my mouth fill. And you can make a little game out of it. Like I put there, you could increase the time. So if you're doing like a constant pressure mouth fill in the mirror, you're seeing how long you can manage that air for, letting it leak out without doing anything weird or losing it. You're doing constant pressure, just try to do it for longer. If you're pulsing, try to get more pulses. This one I actually do. I will start pulsing and I'll count. I'll be like 1, 2, 3. I've done, I think, dry like 130 pulses with a dry mouth fill. But when I started counting, it was like, I think the first one was like 20. So just figuring out how to keep everything tight. How do I equalize this or pulse as small as possible so that I can get more pulses? Now, if I can do 120 or 30 dry, it doesn't mean I can do 120 or 30 wet. It's going to be harder in the water. There's more CO2, more stress, all those fun things. But if I can increase the amount that I can do dry, it will translate to improvement in the water. Once you got it dry, try it upside down. Try it in the pool. I do this now in the pool at Super Home in Panglao. I put my nose clip on loose, and I put my feet, like, if this was the edge of the pool, I put this part of my leg here, and so I'm just upside down in the pool with my nose clip on leaky, and then I mouth fill. and I start counting and listening to like the bubbles that are coming out every time I pulse. And this makes it a little bit closer to a dive because now I've got some water pressure on me. I'm upside down, so it's a little bit weird. I'm a little bit stressed. So that would be an idea for like a next step of practice. Does anyone want to see that again or have any questions? Is anyone going to try it in the mirror? Yeah, you don't have to have a nose clip. You can do it with your fingers, but maybe just try it. The problem with the fingers is it's like you got to try and keep it the consistent pinch every time where it's leaking the same amount. You could even use like a wooden clothes peg. would work if you can get one on there kind of loosely. Yeah. Anything else? Any questions? I don't. Do you? Okay, does anyone else have air leak out of their eyes? Okay, guess what? This is actually, it's not common, but it's not uncommon. I've had plenty of students that can actually, has anyone ever filmed it? Like get bubbles of air come out of there? It's so gnarly. Oh my God. I had a student once, he was on a beginner course and he was like, my eyes feel weird. My eyes feel slimy. I'm having problems equalizing. And he kept complaining about his eyes feeling weird when he was equalizing. And I was like, you know what? Let's try something. Just go like half a meter underwater, take your mask off. He was super comfortable. And I was like, just hold a frenzel. So he held a frenzel and I filmed on his GoPro and there was a steady stream of bubbles coming out. So in some people, one of the tear ducts, it can connect with some of the little passages like to the sinus. And if you hold enough pressure, so if you equalize hard enough or you do like a constant pressure equalization, air can come out. It's crazy. I have a friend who has this exact problem when he's mouth filling deep. He says that, anecdotally, on the way up, he gets a little bit of water in his mouth because his tube is like so connected, which sounds really uncomfortable. But anyway, it's a thing. I Googled it and I can't remember what percentage of people, but it's not like that uncommon. Like it's not normal, but it's not super abnormal. Like there's nothing wrong with you, is what I'm trying to say.
I don't have to equalize my mask.
You know what I would try? If I could do this, I would try like just for fun in a really controlled environment, like putting swim goggles on and just like seeing if I could equalize them. I wouldn't recommend it for a deep dive though, but it's like kind of a fun party piece, if you know what I mean. Cool question. Anything else? What do I have on the next? Oh my God, we did it. With 4:59, we did it. Oh my God. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Is everyone clear on what the recommended, my favorite dry exercise is? It's just leaking. It's basically leaking mouthfill and a lot of curiosity with a mirror. Yeah.
There's no other questions. Can you go over the charge?
Oh, the charge.
Like how do you bring that up, and how is it different than the reverse pack?
How do you bring it up? I make a noise. People call it M or an N charge. It's kind of like you're humming M or N, but
Do you push it all with your lungs?
so not with my lungs. No, the lungs themselves, they can't really push. It's actually like when I charge, I do admittedly push a little bit with the abdominal wall. Like you can probably see it tense a little when I do that. I try to find the place, and for me it's 20 meters, where there's a balance between like how much air I can get and like how relaxed I can do that charge. If I try to do it deeper, for me it turns into this, which then just leads to like a bunch of tension. And that's not great. And then I do it and I'm like, ooh, that was a shitty mouthfill, and then I'm just with that for the rest of the dive. Shallower, you can actually do it shallower. It'll be even easier, and you might not have to get the abs involved. It's basically like a giant reverse pack.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you ever lost your mouth over your mouth?
Oh, spit it out? Yeah, not the whole thing, but like sometimes when I'm charging, it's usually if I do something stupid. I used to do the bit of the head motion, like the thing people were doing with the like. Sometimes when I take it, I get so caught up like oh my God, it has to be the biggest mouthfill ever. It's usually when I'm really nervous about making the depth. And I'll spit a few bubbles out. Doesn't really matter. I do know some divers, a lot of the Japanese divers, they started doing their mouthfill like this because it kind of helps them. They tell me it helps them with their awareness or with kind of getting that pressure correct at the start of the mouthfill. You'll see on dive, I actually don't have like a strong thought or opinion on that, except to say that I don't do it. For me, personally, any small thing, including it seems like the position of the moon that day, will affect my mouthfill. And so the more parts of my body that I have to move or get involved, the more things, like at least in my mind, are going wrong. And so for me to do this, it's almost like one more thing that's like, oh, my fingers aren't quite right, or maybe I don't want them to be here. So for me, really, the less I muck around, the better. But I do know some divers who. Honestly, the dives where I spit a tiny bit out by accident, it doesn't really bother me. Because I guess I know from practice that if I've announced a depth that's reasonable, which, I mean, I'm human, so I don't always do that, that probably I can manage what I've got good enough. And even if I'm not sure, I'm going to try. And I'm just, you know what, let's manage it. Let's just see how far we can go with this crappy mouthfill. And sometimes you surprise yourself. Good question. I wish I had a better answer about this, but I don't use it, about the spitting out the air and the... Anything else? Yeah.
Sorry, I think I went to the washroom. But
That's
can
okay.
you explain more about shrinking the container?
So long story short, your cheeks and mouth are the container for the air, and the air is shrinking. If you don't shrink that container with the air, then you create a negative pressure. Basically, it makes it more likely, it's a lot of pressure on your glottis, and it's really likely that you're going to swallow that air, or that your soft palate is going to lock up and you're not going to be able to equalize. So you have to maintain a certain amount of tension or pressure in the face. If it's still in your cheeks, it's going to be in the cheeks and face. And once you've moved that air into the mouth, it's going to be with the tongue and the jaw. You have to shrink your container around the air. If you don't, you'll swallow or you won't be able to equalize.
So how do you shrink?
So when the mouthfill is in the cheeks, you use pressure in the mouth and cheeks. So you keep everything tight. Make sense? If you, like, let's say you've got air in your mouth and you're really relaxed about it, you're like, you will swallow, 100%. You gotta kind of tighten the face. Once the air is inside, like it's like a golf ball of air sitting on your tongue, you have to use the tongue and the jaw together to kind of gently go up, and sort of you're visualizing the air going up and back. Some people talk about the locks, like they go, okay, T lock, K lock, then H lock, but I find like overall as a broad and more simple topic is shrink the container around the air. And I know people who don't use the locks. They actually don't know what they do, or they can't explain what they do. They just say up and back. And some people say, I roll the tongue along. I've heard people say, I roll the tongue along the top of the mouth and then I push the air back. So I think there's no like 100% right way to do it as long as you're shrinking that container. That was the principle that I wanted to communicate. Anything else?
So there was a video?
A video.
Yeah.
A video of Moutfill? Oh, I didn't prepare a video.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it would...
Maybe I mentioned video or photo of my eustachian tubes when I was talking about screwed up eustachian tubes. Yeah.
I thought you said something about freediving Barbados or something.
Oh, yeah. So if you want to hear a little bit or ask somebody a question who equalizes only using BTB and a mask, that would be the guy.
When he gets 100 messages, he's going to be mad.
Yeah. No, he'll be happy. He's a super freediving nerd. Yeah. He loves the Instagram. He'd be thrilled. What else? Did I just like super confuse anyone, like just for curiosity, or? Cool. Okay, that's good. Sometimes I get a little bit of imposter syndrome, so I'm just like, I don't know. Like, did I just, how was it?
You did amazing.
Yay. Thank you. What next? What next?
We stay here as
Oh, that was fun, guys.